There's been recent discussions, both I think inside and certainly outside the Fed, about whether the Fed ought to reconsider the way it thinks about inflation. And specifically, I guess the way I understand this discussion is whether the Fed ought to target a price level rather than a change in the price level. And specifically, if there were an extended period of time when inflation ran below a target, would it make sense for the Fed to intentionally attempt to exceed the target modestly or by enough so that over a long period of time you'd hit the average? My first reaction is to be pretty concerned about that. Intentionally running at an inflation rate above the target rate worries me, given that historically inflation has been much harder to control, and high inflation has been a bigger problem than low inflation. But I wonder what your thoughts are about this topic.
These are questions, as you know, that are going to be the subject of careful consideration over the course of this year and beyond in our thinking. You know, the issue that we face is that rates have come down. Long and short rates have come down really over the last 40 years and are now they're just much lower. Real rates, right. And of course inflation, we had inflation back in nominal rates as well. The implication of that being that in a typical downturn, the odds are much higher that we'll wind up back at the zero lower bound again. So in that situation, that fact there has the potential to drag inflation expectations down over time. In our thinking, inflation expectations are now the most important driver of actual inflation. So we're trying to think, and really the economics profession's been thinking about it for 20 years, since the experience of Japan in the late 90s, thinking of ways to make that inflation 2% target credible, highly credible, so that inflation kind of averages around 2% rather than only averaging 2% in good times and then averaging way less than that in bad times, which would drag expectations down. No decisions have been made. It is, you raise there are plenty of questions and concerns to be addressed. But there's also a problem that I think we owe it to the public to try to think our way through the best possible way to address that problem so that we can carry out our mandate.
Yeah, I understand the logic. I understand the problem that you're wrestling with. I would just urge great caution on this for many reasons, not the least of which, for whatever period of time the Fed decided it would exceed the goal so that it averages the goal. First of all, during that period of time, presumably you don't have price stability. I mean, certainly not zero. I mean, you'd be intentionally running above even the goal. So I've got other questions, but I see I'm out of time. I just want to urge caution on that one, Mr. Chairman.